All right, here we are. Let's check. All right. Good morning. We're on day 16 of ClickRigs design time. Did not get a chance this morning to make a thumbnail for this stream, but we'll get one in after it's over. Let's see, let's do a little tracky. Sweet. Okay, so what are we doing today? We've got, let's jump to the overhead. We've got this brand new trophy truck kit. It's a competitor to the MD-RD01 that's already in the store. This is the TB-RD01. The TB and the MD stand for Mayday and Thorne Buckingham, two fictional rival drivers in the world of Harley Dome, which is the ClickRigs fictional universe. And this new trophy truck kit has a number of improvements over the Mayday kit, but they are very different. In fact, that might be kind of an interesting place to start. Let me go grab the hey buddy. Go grab the Mayday kit here, and let's see. I think I was messing with the exposure on the wrong camera there. All right. Let's just bump this one up a little bit though. All right, that looks better. Okay, so let's jump over here into 2. What do we got going on? Sweet. Okay, so we're just going to do a quick comparison here, kind of between the Mayday kits and the Thorne Buckingham kit. So we got the Mayday kit here on the right, and we've got the Thorne Buckingham kit on the left. So the TB-RD01, this is the brand new one that's about to be in the store, and this is the one that's already in there. So this, up until this point, was the premier, like, high performance ClickRigs kit. It's got, the unequal length center pivot A-arm front suspension. It's got a triangulated 4-link live axle rear. This little bit on here is just that's just a little extra piece for a stop motion rig, but that can come off. And so this kit, let's go over some of the differences between the two kits. Actually, let's start with some of the similarities. So they're both A-arm front, long travel A-arm front ends. They're both triangulated 4-link rear suspension. So they're both pretty typical trophy truck setups. They've got, you can kind of, but where else are they similar? They both use kind of a butterfly leaf spring in the front, and they both use a quarter elliptic leaf spring on each trailing arm in the rear. but they're also quite a bit different. So let's start with, I guess, a couple of those differences. The A-arm setup is kind of done in a different way. So on the Mayday kit, the upper A-arms are actually two separate pieces, and then the lower pair of A-arms and the uprights are one separate piece. And then those things kind of come together, and then they attach here with this upright pin. So if I kind of take them apart, you can kind of see, actually that's how that A-arm is a separate piece. And then this lower is a separate piece as well. And so there are some advantages to this setup. This upright kind of being outboard and very tall does a couple things for us. It makes it relatively robust and pretty strong. It adds a lot of stiffness. It spaces these A-arms are spaced out 15 millimeters, like up and down, and so that provides a fairly rigid setup. It also means that we can bring the axle in kind of tangent to the bottom, so we don't have anything sticking kind of below the axle diameter. So it gives it just a little bit more ground clearance. The disadvantages to this approach, though, are twofold. One, it means the actual length of the arms, so pivot to pivot, is actually a little bit shorter than it could be, because you've got the space of this upright sticking inboard that you'd have to make the whole truck wider and to get a longer arm. So for a given track width, the A-arms are shorter. And then the other disadvantage is, because these are separate pieces, you have to connect the upper to the lower somehow. And so at the top of this upright, we've got this link pin that connects these two. So it's effectively like a ball joint, and it's very similar to a typical ball joint. It's a weak point, and so what happens in a crash is this will become separated, and so that's just the nature of that setup. And so some advantages, but also some disadvantages. And so when we set out to design the Thorn Buckingham rig, the TBRD01, as a competitor to this, that was kind of one of the first things I wanted to improve upon, was sort of the durability of this front end. And the way that I ended up doing that was by essentially making this entire piece one continuous piece, so that out here, this upright can be much closer to the bearing and to the wheel. In this case, it's also not quite as tall, so we get a little more camber change as it cycles through. But to do that, to get it that close into the wheel, which gives us a couple things. It gives us a longer A-arm for a given width. So this one is actually a little bit narrower than the Mayday rig, but it's also got longer A-arms, and so, which is advantageous. But to do that, we can't have, this link pin takes up space, and so you can't really package it in there. And so the way around that was to actually just make the entire A-arm setup out of one piece. I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like. So fish it out of there. And so you can kind of see this entire thing has been manufactured as one continuous piece. And so these pivots are just integrated there. There's no need for a separate connector. So the whole thing gets connected at these 4 points at the top, but the entire linkage is one deal. And so that, again, gave us the advantage. It allowed us to package a longer A-arm without having to go super wide. It makes this connection here a lot more durable. And yeah, it's I think overall a good setup. And then the other kind of differences here, it's a little bit more difficult to see, but on this, on the Mayday kit, the lower A-arm assembly, kind of the chassis spacer in the center section is molded into that lower arm as one assembly. Whereas on this one, this assembly is flat, and we actually have a rigid main beam connector. And what that does is it just kind of adds strength and makes this entire thing a lot more rigid. So this whole thing just kind of gets picked up like that. And the entire thing gets sort of sandwiched in there. Let's pull this. And then these connectors. Tie the whole front end together. And that kind of brings us to another difference in these front ends, or how the wheels attach. So, all of these connections for the wheels and bearings are pretty much just friction. This one, it's kind of this 3/4 round, and it just presses on, and that does a pretty good job. But again, similar to the upright, in a big crash, sometimes these come apart. Again, not a big deal. It's not a permanent breakage. It just means you have to repair the crash damage by sticking the wheels back on. But I wanted those to be a little bit more robust, so you don't have to reattach your wheels quite as often as you're playing with these in kind of a big way. And so on these, let's see. Might be difficult to see, but essentially there's that little lip molded in. So we went to a hex shape, and then a little lip, retaining lip, and I don't know if I have a bearing here. But it takes a lot more work to get the bearing on. So now, once the bearing's on, the bearing pretty much won't come off unless you decide to pull it off. But the wheel and tire will come off instead. But that's a much larger surface area friction connection, and so that's more durable. But kind of get it started, and then once it's started, you just kind of grab it like so, and once it pops through, that is very solidly retained unless you actually kind of push that lip in and work it off like that. So anyway, that's an improvement. These will pretty much stay attached. And then I guess moving on to the rear, we kind of have a similar setup. So on the new one, we've kind of got so on the Mayday rig, and as on a lot of our other rigs, this used a wedge system, which might be a little hard to see here, but see if we can retain the wedge. So the rigid part of the axle has this little orange wedge, and this thing's tiny. And that kind of goes in this little V groove and just gives a little bit of like extra compression and elasticity to retain the bearing. But they can be a little tricky, and when they do come off, it's easier to lose the wedge, and to get it on, you kind of have to like hold it and then with your thumb and then get it started and then push the bearing on. And that worked. It's just not it's not as nice as it could be. And so that was the other thing kind of wanted to improve. Actually, it's probably easier to see it on this one because there's more contrast. So the way we fixed that was on this rear axle. It's also rigid, but it has a hex that protrudes out, and then there are these elastic hexagonal top hats that press over it that also have the same lip that's in the front. And once these are on, it's kind of you can get them off, but they're not really intended to come on and off all the time. They're designed to be retained. And so that snaps into place, and then you can snap a bearing onto it. And so overall, pretty happy with the way those improvements have worked out. And so now you've got kind of a rig where all of the bearings are nicely retained, but you can still easily remove the axles. And these are standard 608 skate bearings, so you can get all kinds of high performance bearings for these things if you really want to bust them loose here. Let's see what else has changed. So again, you can kind of see the Mayday kit is wider by a little bit, and I kind of wanted to make the Thorne Buckingham rig just a little bit more compact, kind of to suit his driving style, while still being very high performance and long travel. So in some ways the Thorne Buckingham kit is a little bit narrower, but also has more front wheel travel. And then on the rear, kind of the same thing. It's a little bit wider and shortened up the overall length of the two rigs is the same. So like from here to here is the same, but the wheelbase on the TBRD01 is a little bit shorter. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, because I wanted to get a shorter trailing arm into the mix, just to kind of make the suspension a little bit more controlled, and a little bit more, the whole system a little bit more rigid. But also so that we could, instead of mounting the spare tire on top of the tail, like on the Mayday kit, I wanted to be able to mount it underneath to keep the center of gravity lower and still have the axle be able to tuck all the way up to the tail right in front of that spare. And so kind of shortened this length up a little bit, and you can kind of compare the differences. You can kind of see that this one's a fair bit longer, and then you look at the bottom, and it's also you can see the differences quite apparently, because if you like match up the two pivot points, which are at the same spot compared to the cab, that's kind of where they land. Advantages and disadvantages to both. This thing is, to me, it's kind of like, it's like an ungainly teenager that like grew too fast and like doesn't quite have total control over his limbs. This thing has a lot of travel, just a lot of motion, but it does have the ability to eat up some and just absorb some really gnarly bumps. But it's not the most controlled rig, and when it gets out of hand, it just tumbles, and but it's so it's kind of like in some ways I would compare it to kind of like a 90s era trophy truck, when all the ideas were there, but they weren't totally refined yet. And so the wheel travel was large, but it wasn't necessarily the most controlled wheel travel in the world. And when you watch videos of like a current trophy truck versus trucks from that era, in some ways the trucks from that era look kind of more impressive, even though they're not as fast, just because they're not nearly as controlled. So it's always like they're riding that fine edge of chaos. And so that's sort of what the Mayday rig is like. So even though in a lot of ways this is a better rig, the new one, the TBRD01 is a better rig, the Mayday one is just a ton of fun to watch going down the ramp or descended off jumps, because it's just it's like just barely in control. And you can kind of see that in the way it drives down the ramp. Whereas the Thorne Buckingham one it's kind of everything's tighter, more compact, more rigid, more controlled. And so when it goes through a course or down the ramp, it's kind of bouncy is not quite the right word, but it's just more composed, I think. Even though at the threshold, the extreme ends, it probably doesn't have as much ability to sort of absorb giant impacts. It does have a better ability to sort of stay composed through them, if that makes sense. The other area, again, getting back to kind of like link pins, like this one, it's got these like individual main links, same like here, and in the kit without the upgrade, these are individual link pins as well. And again, in a crash, these will tend to kind of separate like that. And then, fixing it, it's just a matter of popping it back in. But one of the things I wanted to do with this rig is make it a lot more tolerant of a crash. So there's just less repair that you have to do on it as the thing tumbles. And so part of that was sort of just integrating all of the highly loaded link pin mounts into basically more snap dot locations. And so to do that, there's a top and bottom axle truss, and that truss not only picks up all three snap dot points on the axle to retain the upper and lower links, but it also has these clips that basically snap over and then hold that whole thing together. So it's a very robust system, compared to like this one. And so that I think is an improvement as well. And then similar kind of inboard, there's been a lot of custom components or new components made primarily with the goal of kind of retaining like this upper triangle link and then these two lower struts. And so let's see what else is different. The tail boom is actually quite a bit different as well. On the Mayday rig, this one is manufactured with the side flat, so you pretty much just have a flat surface to work on, and then it's unsupported, so this whole thing is cantilevered all the way out, and then it's got, it takes a lot of impact. It's got the weight of the spare tire hanging back. It's what stops the up travel. And so in order to keep the cab and the tail boom connected, we need these three massive 1x5 connectors. And those do a good job of that. It's just not the most elegant solution in the world. And so on this one, I've actually inverted the tail piece so that this is the flat side, canted the whole thing up a few degrees, I think 5 degrees, something like that. And then recessed a single 1x5 connector with this neat X-brace kind of retention cap. And then because it's still cantilevered just as far out, to get away with just the single connector, we support it by triangulating the whole thing with these struts, which are just essentially flexible links that pick up here and here and then come out and support this tail. So now this tail is like triangulated through here, and it's much stronger than this one, even with just a single 1x5 connector. So it kind of looks cooler. So from an engineering standpoint, it's a little bit more elegant of a design. And yeah, I think I was pretty excited about that. The other big difference is in the design of the springs. And so with this one, we're kind of introducing something that we're calling a recurve spring. And essentially, it's just a change in the way the springs are manufactured. With these springs, they're manufactured flat in this direction, which means then once you preload it, it's bending it out from its natural state. Whereas with the recurve spring, we actually manufacture them in this direction, which lets us build in a certain amount of preload curve, which does a couple things. It helps you get the full droop travel out of the system, but also these springs, because they're made out of a polymer, will take a set over time. I mean, a steel spring will as well. It's just not quite as pronounced. And so the recurve spring essentially allows you to build some of that set, or to compensate for some of that set. And so you get a spring that doesn't just immediately, or not immediately, but after like an amount of time sitting on its own weight, doesn't droop, doesn't sag as much. That said, with all of these springs, I mean, they'll all take a set. It's just the nature of the material. So if you've got a rig that has a spring set that's just kind of like, just seems like it's kicked, all you have to do is store these things on something that allows the gravity to pull the suspension down into the droop state. And after like a day of sitting like that, these springs will be restored. And so that's why we do recommend you store them kind of, you can either take the links out, or you can, to take that load off the spring, or you can just store them on something. And so with this release, we're also going to be releasing a stand. This isn't the final color, but that's similar to the design. And then on this one, it's just designed to like mesh in there. And so storing it kind of like that on the stand. This obviously works with the wheels on as well. Although it does look cool with the wheels off. It's kind of like it's like in a prep state, like it would be in a race shop. By storing it on a stand, you make sure that those springs will never take a set. That has to be undone. And so that's just something good to know. And so the recurve spring, and we did that on the rear springs and on the front butterfly spring. And so that basically just builds more integral tension into the springs at the ride heights that we want. And so that has worked out really well. So moving forward, we're probably going to sort of do all of this style of spring in the recurve format, just because it works so much better. In a lot of ways, it's similar to the like the leaf springs, which kind of obviously are manufactured with this curve built in. And depending on the rig, this is the Earl Motors Baja Race Commando, and so it's got kind of a stiffer spring set. It's not really designed for articulation. It's meant for absorbing bumps and jumps. Compared to like the Rock Boogie, which is a very similar setup. It's a solid axle leaf spring, but those leaf springs are much softer. I think they're a little longer as well, and they have less pre-curve in them. And those are not designed to jump, but they are designed for max articulation, to keep wheels in contact with the ground as they articulate over obstacles. And so just something to note. What else is different about this? We just kind of like cleaned up some of the stuff. We've got these side covers here that kind of just clean up the sides. You can kind of see just like that. More of a cosmetic thing, but makes it look cool. And so those are all the layers, and then the side cover just kind of snaps over just like that to kind of clean up the whole look. And so yeah, those are some of the primary differences between these rigs. And so you kind of see them here, but they're both super fun rigs to have. This one, if you can only get one, which I don't recommend, I recommend getting them all, of course. But if you can only get one, I guess the way to decide, this one again is a little bit more complex, kind of has more finish work on it, and especially if you've got like a younger child who's playing with it, this one will hold up to kind of like the abuse of small children toward the toy a little bit better than this one will. But if you sort of enjoy kind of, I guess, the fun of watching a barely controlled super long wheel travel thing kind of plow through obstacles, this one is very entertaining to watch. Even if you're going to be sort of performing repairs on it by popping the pieces back together more often, and even though it's less refined, this one is a joy to watch because it's kind of crazy. And so the real fun is having both of them and then being able to compare them down a similar run and just kind of see how these somewhat subtle changes, I mean, they're both the same sort of suspension plan, they're both the same kind of overall layout, but how these subtle changes between that can make a pretty big difference in kind of the dynamics of a vehicle. And so, yeah. But in order to be able to compare these two, you will need to be able to purchase this. And so that's primarily what we're going to be working on today. This is a little bit of a tangent, but we got some finish work to be done to get this thing in the store. I had thrown out some different colorways earlier and kind of came down to the orange and gray, and then a gray and kind of a blue-green accent color. And I think for the primary version, we're going to go, just so like for the standard version of this, we're going to go with the orange and gray, seen here. But we are going to take, we've been sort of toying with the idea of doing a special edition colorway that we only make like 100 of, or something like that. 100 is the number that keeps coming up. In that colorway, with every new release of a new vehicle or a new version of that vehicle. And so, like if you are collecting these things and you want to get your entire collection in that one colorway, the only way to do it would be to get those first edition releases when they come out. And so I'm pretty sure we're going to take that gray and blue-green color scheme and use that as the first edition color scheme release. And so those will be the only vehicles that will ever be made in that colorway. But then every new release will be available in a limited run in that colorway. So this will be coming out in that colorway. We're going to get this one up in the store first, and then probably what we're going to do is take all of the first edition vehicles that are in the store now and make them available in a limited run in the gray and blue-green colorway. So, but today we're working on this one. We're going to get that one in the store. So let's see. This is our Airtable database, in case you're wondering. Got all of these components. And then, K14 is sort of the printer pack designator for this new rig. These are all the components that are in that. S11 will be the sub-assembly for that. And so it's got your ABC plates, a build guide. and then the box designator. So what we need to do is start getting this thing into the store. But actually, you know what, before we do that, we got let's jump back into the overhead here. So the last week we were working on sort of a print in place ball end link organizer kit. I was not able to get the print in place part to work reliably, but I was able to make a nice snap-in organizer, and so that's, you know, we got a couple of them here, and so did get this to work. So essentially what this is each one of these is a single kit of ball end links that span 22 millimeters in length to 10 millimeters in length. And so these are always done in increments of 2, so it's like 22, 20, 18, 16, 14, 12, and 10. And that will pretty much give you a really good range for being able to tune all of the suspension, like preload and ride heights, on any of the kits that sort of use this butterfly and quarter elliptic, basically any kit that uses a ball end link for its ride height adjustment. And so this new kit will basically include 4 of these, and with that, you know, you've got 4 corners, and so by having 4 of these, it means you can pretty much run any combination of front and rear tuning that you want. And we had been messing with text a little bit, and so one of the I got the text to print in nicely by doing it on the side. So works much better. You can get much smaller text to resolve well by printing it vertically on a wall rather than kind of on the top or the bottom. Even though that seems kind of counterintuitive, you start kind of running into issues of like minimum line thickness when you go here, but here you are basically limited to the resolution of your layer height, which in this case is about double what the line thickness is here, so or the inverse of that. But I don't know if you can kind of see, but those are the link lengths. And then the way this works, it has these little buttons on the back, and so you can, I don't know if you can hear this, but just kind of clips out, and then you can remove your length. And then to put it back in, you just kind of stick it in there, snaps back in. So it's just a nice, neat little way to kind of keep your tuning kits stored and organized, and then let you know what they are. And then obviously this also helps you sort them and know what the lengths are without having to measure them, because they only will snap into the right slot. So it's a way to know what the lengths are and also just kind of keep them organized, and it looks kind of cool. So that will be coming out with these as well, and we'll probably update the existing suspension tuning kit to kind of use this system. And on that one, you know, it was, the organizer was just this bit, and it kind of popped in like that, but then they get all wonky, and then there's also no way to know, you know, it has the lengths, but it has no way, you have to measure them to know where they go. With this, it's just kind of, the organizer is the thing that helps you measure it. And it's kind of cool. It's just, it's hard to see, but when there's a link in there, it pops that little button out in the back enough just to let you pop it in and out. So yeah, happy with that, but yeah, got those working. So anyway, let's get this back into the right configuration here. So I think where we left off, we're working on the render assembly, so this one's been fully finished. I've organized this into kind of static mates, just some folders. The articulating mates kind of for the suspension. And then I have these, what I call articulation control mates, and like there's one right here that's I believe a planar mate, just to keep the left and right side moving up the same, so that instead of articulating, it'll just move up and down. And so this, I'm pretty sure, is set up. We've got all the components in it. So this is our render assembly. And what we'll do is I'll export this out, and then we'll take it back into KeyShot, and we'll do all the final product renders for it. And then our kit assembly is here, and we can turn on all these components, but these are all the components that are kind of in the system, and these are the manufacturing components. So everything here gets exported for manufacture, versus the stuff in the render assembly is kind of a mix of components because some of these needed to change. And so I do see we've got, we've got to insert a couple more parts into here because we are missing some items. And items were missing, so let's see. And a lot of this is just kind of the tedious work of making sure that the database and all the components are entered as official components with a CR part number into the system, so they can be referenced later, because that is one of the neat things about these. You buy a kit, you play with it, but if you ever lose or break a component, you can buy just that individual part from us, and our goal is to be able to do that with all of the kits that we've ever made. So keeping everything organized is a very necessary thing to do in order to be able to pull that off, because we're hundreds of parts in now. We'll be thousands of parts in probably by the end of the year. So let's see. So I'm just looking up, we need to get the limit straps in there. It's a CR47. And I'm just, as I'm going through, I'm kind of updating the part names and everything, so everything shows up properly. Perfect. We're going to insert that. But we need to make a version. Just so that the assembly kind of knows that it's been updated. And I'll show up here. And now we've got the proper name kind of over here on the left hand side. And this is going to get two of these. I'm just going to copy and paste it. For this, it doesn't really matter where they are, because we just export this whole batch as a single step file and then bring it into the slicer. Let's see, so now the other bits we are going to need are the new recurve springs. So we are looking at CR167. And this one, actually, I made some changes to it yesterday. And so I need to update this in the model catalog. Essentially, I just moved this inboard a little bit so that this didn't poke through, because on some big impacts, the ball end link was popping out this end. So I just made this part more rigid and more robust, and that seems to have done the trick. And this one is going to replace the step file in the model catalog. And then in the library, we're going to find that one. You can kind of see here, so this is what it was. And a lot of times this works, but with these recurve springs, the angle, I guess, changes a little bit. And so having this end here kind of be open was allowing the ball end link to force its way out there, kind of when it took a really big impact, like a nose landing. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to update this. With that, you kind of see this part here change. See? And so now that's just more contained, so it just makes the ball retention a lot more rigid. And then this one needs its proper name. And we need to change the appearance so that it matches our TPU. Doesn't match the production color, it just in CAD we kind of use the color scheme to let us know what material, what components are made out of what material types. And again, create a version. And a couple things will happen here. Let's just get it inserted first. So that's now in there. And then if we go to our render assembly, that actually, did that change? That probably did not change, because that is not a, that uses a special articulating component that's not standard. Yeah, nothing to update there. And let's just go in and get the other two springs. Got a driver and a passenger side for the rear, so it's 171. This one's good. We're just kind of cleaning up the listing by updating the names. By doing that, it just makes sure that the proper name with the proper part number shows up in our kind of list of components in those assemblies. And we're going to do that for 173. I just turn the planes off because I don't like looking at them. we should be able to insert both of those. Okay, so we've updated the butterfly spring with the better ball retention. We've cleaned up these catalogs, we've inserted those parts, we've inserted this part. I'm pretty sure that's all of the TPU parts that we've got in here. Let's see. Yep, everything I think is in here. Let's just make sure we've got these kind of is that what I wanted? What I want to do is get the front and rear the same. And this can just be eyeballed. It's for the render, it's close enough. We actually sink the tire a little bit into the ground plane on the render, which kind of makes it look more like the tires have weight on them. So it makes the render look a little bit more realistic rather than modeling the tire every time with like different bulges. But for now, I just want to make sure that they're roughly right where, so I just kind of highlight one in yellow and then drag it up and down until it's probably good enough. And on the rear, there's a articulation control mate in place that will keep them, and so this one is set up so that the pre-modeled and pre-bent limit strap is correct. And just to make sure that those are roughly even. And so what we'll probably end up doing is sink this kind of little corner that sticks down because of the camber into the ground plane, and that'll make it look real nice. Awesome. And so let's go ahead and export this whole thing out here. And just look what box number this is. It's a B6. I'll export that. While that's running, we'll get KeyShot fired up. That's a good question. Let's save that. Alright, and I'll turn the little tracking off here. I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll jump back into doing some final renders. Be right back. this here. And let's start with the one that we worked on before. And we're just going to save this out as a new one. Cool. So now let's just let's import our model. They running around, bud? Alright. Just lay down, lay down. Pots. Good girl. Okay. Now we're just importing the new model. Looks better. All right, so let's turn off that one. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start applying materials to this thing. It's already in a good position. So let's actually we want the red dirt tire. That's better. And let's see, let's just let's go to materials and just get the colors changed. Sweet. Okay, so let's jump back into the scene. So the way we do this, I've got essentially, that one's correct. So we're going to go into our scene, find our cab. That's the bottom. Let's see. I'm kind of curious about, so I made these kind of a multi-material thing. What I'd like to know is how to break that back out. We're just going through and we're assigning materials to everything here. Just kind of going down the list and okay, so now just unlink these, which kind of creates duplicates down here. This is going to be our accent color. I'm just going to rename them. So this is essentially the actually before, let's go and rename these because these are actually the B plate. And again, the top, side, and bottom are just kind of the different textures. If I don't name them now, it'll get out of hand. So you got B top, B side, B bottom, and then we're going to have essentially an A bottom, an A side, and an A top. Excellent. I'm just going to go down our list. The TPUs don't get a texture. You can kind of see roughly what that looks like. Let's unlink that. These actually are orange. Hey, quiet. Scared me. That's weird. It's unlike this. It's better. Fortunately, once these are all in, we don't have to do it again, and we can generate all of our scenes without having to reapply materials every time, because this is one of the more tedious parts. It's kind of fun seeing the colors come together, especially the first time, but we've already done this once. was weird. We're getting there. You can kind of see our little material library is shrinking as we replace kind of all the pre-assigned materials that this thing came in with. We are almost there. This would be a lot faster if I was just assigning a single material to each part, but effectively I'm assigning 3 different materials to each part to simulate the print textures, and so it's a little more time consuming. So this one, we're going to want to unlink that. That's coming along nicely. Let's see. So now we've just got some stragglers. Let's do this. Let's turn on everything here. Go to materials. Select parts of the material. And here we actually, let's do this. Boom. It's the ground plane color. I'm going to apply that as well. What else? Interesting. We got some stragglers here. Interesting. So let's go. I'm just going to check that in the this thing here. I don't know what that's all about, but we're going to have to fix that. Oh, I see what's going on here. Let's just get rid of that right now. That makes more sense. Okay. How do we do material-wise? Bearing seals. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that material is coming from. Okay, I think we are pretty much set now. So let's just check our. Let's open our studios. Pretty good. Pretty good. Okay, so here's something I kind of want to. Let's do this. I'm going to unlink this material. Just going to rename this, and we're going to call this hood side. We're going to go and edit this. Looks better. You can kind of see the layer lines weren't weren't oriented correctly. And let's see, is there anything else that's like totally funky? Let's go side view. I think those are all good. Let's see. Let's go back to the studios. Okay, we got a little weirdness going on here, so let's my guess is the tire is overlapping a little bit. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to move that down. Just going to do this whole thing. Looks good. And this one's a little bit, let's fuzzball on my mouse, I think. Let's unlink this material. Gonna rename this one tail boom top. We're gonna edit that. That looks a little better. Kind of oriented more like it's actually going to be made. And then we got a couple more here. I think on this light it looks a little bit funky. I think that looks better. And I think we can just use the same one for this one. Yeah. Really like how that looks. I'm curious if we just made them all 0. see, that's not right. That is though. There we go. Just a little bit more. Let's go 0.03. There we go. Just trying to dial that in so it looks realistic here. And getting back to here. Yeah, we gotta tweak this one. So let's see. Let's unlink that material. Much better. Let's unlink this one. Much better. I think we want to do that for these too. Oh, you know, we actually don't want to do that, but we do want to probably tweak this one. Much better. All right, just go back to our studios. Okay, so the only thing we need to change now, I've got a with these link pins, we're kind of doing the two outer ones in the accent color, but the center one here is going to be to unlink those. And that's actually going to be just like that. And actually, let's do that. I'm going to unlink that again. We're going to use the hood side, I think. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick break here and I'll be right back. All right, we're back. And we're just getting this render going. So let's do a couple things here. Not what I wanted. think I'm going to create now for the kind of one of the graphics we do, kind of have it without so let's call that default. Let's create a new model set. Let's call this disassembled. Yep. So now we've got that. Let's and so what we should be able to do is kind of start selecting things that we want to get rid of or hide. And we'll essentially just go in and that's why. Looks pretty cool. Get a little edge lighting there, which could look kind of neat. Duplicate. We're gonna crash. Come on, little buddy. Oh, fascinating. Okay. So, okay, so let's do the top view here. But I wonder if it might be cool to kind of take that And then maybe that. Just kind of showing it like I think it's being worked on or something. What's interesting here, what do we have here? Let's unlink that. That's better. So let's do this. Let's that's kind of cool. Let's maybe do that with that and that. Oh. That's kind of cool. I like that. almost kind of wonder, it might also be cool. That was very weird. I don't know what's going on with that. It's kind of fun. So. Okay, I wonder if we should add the stand in. Let's I do kind of like this scene though. So let's see. Awesome. Okay, and I think we just need a side view, so let's just kind of run through these here real quick. Cool. Let's do one more from the side. You know what? Let's delete that bottom side. Let's go to default. One second. There we go. Okay, so let's add one more studio here. Okay, so we should be able to cycle through all of these here. Top view. It's pretty good. So now what we can do is we can set this thing to render. And we can render studios. We're just going to render all of the studios. And we're going to output, and we're going to go into this package. And put them into a folder called renders. And now we can process this queue. That's very interesting. Cool. So we got the final render assembly set up, and we got KeyShot set up to render out a bunch of studios. These are going to take a little bit, so I'm going to let them render, and then yeah, I'll just keep working today on getting these things up in the store. I think I'm going to call it a little bit early for this stream, just so I can let these render. But I will be back tomorrow. All right. Thanks for watching.